Hello and welcome. This is Lights Out, and away we go with the episode. With the Formula 1 podcast for fans and by fans. I'm Will, and as I look across the digital garage, as always, I'm joined by my co-driver, or shall I say my co-host, Sam. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hello, Will. Hello again, listeners. I'm very well, thank you. Buzzing from an excellent Grand Prix. Had a very pleasant weekend and a week off this week. So, yeah, I'm genuinely enjoying life very much right now.
You're living the vida.
Absolutely. How about you? How was yours?
Yes, very good, thank you. A very chilled weekend, no weddings. So, nice to have some time at home for the first time for a while. Went to the National Portrait Gallery. Sadly, no portraits of his goatedness, Sir Lewis, yet. But hopefully they can get one in there soon. I mean, there's good ones like Marcus Rashford and all that, but it'd be good if there was one of his goatedness.
Did you write that in the feedback as you left?
No, I should do that. I should leave that on their review. I should request that. But yeah, no, a very relaxing weekend. And yeah, a great Formula 1 race to watch.
I know. It was just nice, wasn't it? I mean, I was quite excited anyway.
Yeah.
And then, well, we'll get into the ins and outs of why it ended up delivering. But yeah, it's the most excited for a race I've been for a while.
Yeah, qualifying served up well, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And it's probably been one of the first times this season, probably the first time this season, where the hype from Saturday has carried on to the hype into Sunday, and Sunday has been better than the Saturday.
Yeah.
But before we get into the actual race, I'll ask you my go-to question. Well, Sam, who won the race?
Well, Will, it wasn't. Can you believe it? It wasn't Max Verstappen and Red Bull. The streak is over. So, we had Greg give us a little voice note recently from Monza. I actually got one from a few fans from Singapore. Do you want to hear it?
Okay, go on then. This is a good surprise. Greatly enjoyed that.
I really enjoyed that. Yes.
That was good. Is that just your friends that are in a choir?
No, that was just what was going around in my head all throughout the end of Q3 because it didn't have a Red Bull in it on Saturday, and then the race turned out to be great as well. So yeah, very good. And yes, a non-Red Bull winner has won a race. The streak is over. The record, potential record for Red Bull winning every race this year has gone. Which is typical because it's come about a week and a half, 2 weeks after you and I decided that if we have to suffer Red Bull dominance, at least let's see them make some history. And now that's ended.
I did say the words, let's get on the hype train for them to win every race of the season. And then literally the next race it ends. So I'm kind of glad it's ended that hype train. But we've had to get our words a little bit there.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, it was brilliant. What did you make of it?
Oh, it's so good. It was so good. It reminds you of what Formula 1 should be. Multiple teams competing for a win, not really sure who's going to win the race, just that jeopardy, and just the race itself, which I thought was a real event, a real spectacle. It changed, the plot changed several times. It was, that's exactly what Formula 1 should be and why you love Formula 1, because those races like that are just the pinnacle of the sport, I think, and it's been a real shame that we've had to wait so many races to have a race of real quality. And I think when we look back at the end of the season, depending on what happens the rest of the season, but so far that is clearly by a strong margin the race of the season, just because of the nature of the race and how it unfolded. I don't think any of the races have brought that much drama, entertainment, tension, spectacle. I thought it was phenomenal, really, really good, and it kind of just shows you again what the season would have been like if Red Bull hadn't absolutely walked it. We had four teams jostling for with four cars, but three teams jostling for the podium points, and you didn't know which way it was going to go throughout the race. It really did fluctuate several times from Ferrari starting one and third to then being Lando and the Mercedes in the mix, and then we ended up with the traffic light winner with the red of Ferrari, the yellow of McLaren, and the green of the Petronas Mercedes.
Nice.
But yeah. What did you make of it? What did you make of the race as a whole?
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, I think it was made good by Mercedes. I want to shower them with absolutely loads of credit, but I think it was exciting because of the decisions they made under the virtual safety car to bring the cars in and challenge to win that way. But overall, the race was great. I just think it's just a really helpful reminder for what it is that we've been missing, because I think there are certain periods during Formula 1, and this season's definitely obviously been one of them, where a car or a driver are so dominant, you just sort of accept they're going to win every race, and that's where we've been with Max all of this season, and that's fine. That's just the way it is this year. And you make your peace with that, and then you seek entertainment and talking points elsewhere. So as we've done on this podcast, we've referred to Max, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times probably over the course of the season so far, usually when he's done something particularly excellent, but generally he's always excellent, he's always winning. We don't need to spend a huge amount of time talking about him. And so we've spoken about lots of other things. It's quite nice to have gone through a race now, a whole race weekend, where the focus of attention was who was going to win the race. Like we haven't had that for so long. And that really, it was a good reminder for what that feels like, because it's been so long. I mean, the last time we had anything like that was when it was probably in Brazil when George won. And then before that, you're going all the way back to sort of early races last season and the races between Leclerc and Verstappen towards the beginning. So it has felt like a long time since we've had a proper battle for a win, and it finishing that close. It was a nice reminder for what life would be like if Red Bull weren't quite as good or had off weekends more regularly.
I think for me as well, like I before the race even started, I thought with where Max qualified, the Red Bull performance in qualifying, just the car setup, and then also just it being that circuit, you just knew that it was not going to be easy for Max to come from 11th through to first. Whereas, if it's Monza or anywhere else, I think he's absolutely fine and he charges through. But the Red Bull really did struggle. And we'll come on to that later. But I just found it refreshing going into the race thinking, well, at least there's a very, very strong chance here that Max is not going to win the race. I think it was at Spa. I think it was when Max came through the field. I just remember texting you and some others as well. And my message to everyone was like, so when do you think Max takes the lead? And everyone was sort of saying 10, 15 laps. Whereas what was really refreshing about this race, that wasn't a conversation at all. No one was going into it going, well, Max is going to be the winner of this race. Everyone knew and everyone accepted that we were going to have someone different win the race. And I was just excited that we knew it would be someone different. And, if it was going to be Carlos Sainz, I would have been very happy. But how the race ended in those, final 15, 20 laps, that's that you couldn't have asked for more than that. I thought it was one of the best endings to a race I've seen in a long, long time. I think you're right. The Merc decision to pit for tyres was inspired. We don't really see Mercedes take risks, but they obviously took that gamble, and they were flying, weren't they? And then they really did set up for a final few laps shootout, and I mean, well, let's dive straight into it.
Yep.
Carlos Sainz, I don't think we've even said his name yet.
No.
Carlos Sainz, the race winner, 100% deserved that race win. An absolute tactical masterclass. I don't think we've seen a driver be that clever with the use of to maintain their lead using their opponent's DRS to hold off those behind him. I don't think I've never seen that before in Formula One.
Yeah.
And I think he also, what was really inspired by him was it was his decision. It was his idea to use that. He knew exactly what part of the circuit he was going to do it and how he was going to play it. And I think at one point they played the radio message of McLaren saying, of his engineer saying, "Oh yeah, the McLaren is getting closer." And Carlos just very coolly responds with, "Yeah, I know, it's by design." And he just had it completely under control. When to close the gap to give Lando the DRS that he could defend against George, but then he could pull away to sort of create a bit of distance, so he was never really under threat. And that's the thing, Lando never really made a move on Carlos because he probably knew that if he tried to fight Carlos, then you just make it even easier for the two Mercs. So it's quite weird to see them work together as teammates despite being on opposing teams. But yeah, I thought it was a really, really impressive drive, and he really did deserve it. And even before that pit at the end, the fact that he was managing the race, he was trying to slow down the race because he knew it was going to affect the others more than it was going to affect him. That's just really smart driving, and that's he's not led many races, but to do that and to take the opportunity, when to deploy that, I thought it was a masterclass. What did you make of the smooth operators weekend and his race win?
Yeah, he was fantastic, start to finish, all weekend actually. And if you consider Monza as well,
he's been on really good form. Been really good form since the summer break, hasn't he?
Yeah. So apparently they did some tests apparently at Ferrari, and Sainz has been pushing for a specific setup choice to be made for a little while, and Ferrari have resisted, and they tested it with him during the summer, and it worked, and they've taken particularly his setup in that direction, and ever since then he's been really rapid, isn't he? I mean, we saw him Monza, and he's had two really like outstanding weekends now. He's out-qualified Leclerc 3 races running, and when you consider the pace of Leclerc and how he's often kind of fated as the best one-lap master on the grid, to out-qualify him 3 times in a row is no mean feat. And yeah, he was just totally dominant all weekend. He was top of the timesheets every free practice, really, really solid all the way through. And then you saw that he's very Prost-like, I think, in the way he thinks through a race and a strategy, and like his calmness behind the wheel, and knows what's necessary to win the race. Because he could have, another driver, I think, would have tried to take off into the distance and really worn through their tyres, left Norris susceptible to the Mercedes attacks, and found themselves being overtaken by Russell and Hamilton probably before the end of the race. And he knew early doors that was a potential outcome, and he had to find a way to keep Lando with him, because his best hope, as we found throughout the last 5 laps, his best hope of staying up top was to keep Lando behind him, because he wasn't going to be able to overtake him, but the Mercedes probably could. So yeah, just brilliant driving, brilliant all weekend. Yeah, he managed the pace really well. I mean, we know the Ferrari's pretty tough on its tyres, although this weekend they seem to have taken a step forwards there, which is great. And yeah, you can't ask any more from him really. And qualified on pole, won the race. Drove fantastically well, kept himself out of trouble. And yeah, got his dream podium, didn't he, with Lando next to him, his friend, his golfing buddy, Carl Lando, as they're known, having a lovely time. Yeah, just fantastic, really, for them. A bit of a shame for Leclerc. I feel a bit bad for him, actually. I don't think he had the best luck, let's say, during the course of the race. So to find himself that far away by the end was probably a bit disappointing for him, and also nearly been caught by Max, wasn't he, in the end? So yeah, a bit of a disappointing one for him. But yeah, you can take nothing away from Carlos. It's not easy to beat Charles over a weekend, and to do it a few weekends running now is really, really impressive. And yeah, I don't know. I've never really thought of Sainz as a sort of serial race winning potential challenger for a championship in the future. But these last 2 weekends, he's looked so comfortable and composed and quick. Like, that's always been a question, isn't it? He's always been quite consistent, but he's never really had the raw pace that Leclerc's had. Yeah. And for him to be beating him the way he has done the last few races, I think is quite telling. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to see what happens next, really, with him.
Yeah, well, I saw earlier that in the driver standings, he's ahead of Charles overall, and he'd probably be gunning for 4th, because Fernando Alonso is sinking like a stone at the moment. And so I think it'd be quite interesting if he ends up, if he finishes the season 4th in the driver standings. That's a great result for him, considering the season the car have had, and to outperform your teammate as well. And yeah, as well, sympathies for Charles as well. I think he's going to be busy working away at that piano to try and get a new masterpiece out to get his sadness out, because he never seemed to be much of a threat before the pit stop. It didn't really challenge at all, and then the pit stop, it was just an absolute car crash, holding the car, and then obviously Lewis playing a blinder by slowing down as he pulled in, so he had to hold him for longer. I do feel a bit sorry for Charles, but I was thinking as you were talking that if Charles is in Carlos's position, I think Charles tries to outmaneuver or defend by driving, by braking hard or positioning the car in that final few laps. I don't think he plays the same strategy that Carlos does, and I think that shows the real difference. I think he uses raw emotion, raw talent to try and battle. I don't think he would have been successful, whereas Carlos, I think, came up with the only strategy that meant he would win the race, and he got very lucky, and it played off really well.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is Sainz certainly benefited from Charles getting such a good start. I don't think Sainz has the same ability to control the pace if Russell keeps second place off the line, particularly in that first stint. But Charles got off the line really well with his soft tyres, and then the 2 Ferraris could basically work together out front to maintain the pack as they want, and stop any undercuts, which was the main threat for them out front. So yeah, I think Charles did a really good job actually off the line and in that first stint. And then yeah, unfortunately for him, despite building quite a big gap actually, or leaving quite a big gap between himself and Sainz, arguably probably a bit too big in the end. That's probably what cost him. But yeah, by playing the team game, he definitely sacrificed his own race a little bit there, which is great for Sainz. But yeah, I should imagine Leclerc's still pretty annoyed. And he was pretty disappointed with the qualifying, wasn't he? I think he's again, he holds himself to really high standards over one lap. for him to be beat by not just his teammate but by Russell as well. I think he was really disappointed about that. So that kind of sets you up for the weekend, really. Singapore's not really one of those races where it's really easy to overtake and you can let teams fight it out. It's quite similar to Monaco in a way, where if you qualify ahead, the odds are you're going to get the better strategy and the team are going to think about your needs more than your teammates. So
yeah. Well, we didn't see many overtakes really in that first stint of the race. It was quite everyone was quite locked in really after those first few laps. I mean, we should come on to him. George Russell, I mean, he did look the quickest driver in that race, because obviously Carlos was managing the pace. But I think he was pretty annoyed that he hadn't qualified on pole, because I think he saw that as an opportunity. And obviously there was that the weird start between him and Hamilton that they kind of lost that momentum, and they kind of wasted time trying to sort out who's in the right order because of Lewis's heroics going into the first corner. But I actually thought it was a really strong drive from George, a really mature drive and a developing drive up until the point of the crash. I thought when he came on the mediums, he was absolutely flying when he came out of the pits. He looked quicker than Lewis did in that, and I think Lewis wasn't far off behind him, but I think George just looked like a real threat going forward, and he dispatched of Charles perfectly, got him done within that lap that he had to do him in, and then closed the gap with 5-6 laps to go. And I think on the Lando attacking Lando, I think he kind of got unlucky that Carlos played that strategy, because that really strung him. But I think he did have one opportunity which he didn't take, and then he just lost his concentration in that last lap. And the way it was shown with the or the onboard, I think it was at the time, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like of Lando's helmet looking at him, and then you just see in the background the Mercedes just shoot off, and that's a crash literally lifted from the F1 manager game. That's how cars crash in the F1 manager game. You'll just see them veer off like that. So I quite enjoyed that. But that was honestly, when that moment happened live, I was just like, oh my god, what the hell? Just going straight in and absolutely binned it. And then I didn't see it at the time with the first few replays that he did actually catch the wall. And I think George, I think he was absolutely kicking himself for that mistake. And I think that's a mistake he makes this year. But give him a year or two, and I think he gets rid of those sort of lapses and those errors. I think that's just a part of maturing. We've seen drivers do that before. Max used to always have those in his locker, and he's got rid of them. I think George will get rid of them as well. Before I come to your thoughts on George's battle for the lead, I did think it was quite spicy between him and Lewis, and I'll come on to that when I talk to Lewis in a minute.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, desperately unlucky, Russell. It certainly sounded like after the race he was sort of following Lando's line. Lando clipped the wall as well, but not quite as hard. And yeah, George obviously, I don't know if he's a few inches, if the Mercedes is a few inches wider than the McLaren or not. But yeah, clearly gave the wall a good whack and took him out of the race. Yeah, it was a real shame. He did have an opportunity to get past Lando, I agree. Didn't quite take it. And then I think he cooked his tyres a bit, trying too hard, and that put him at risk to Lewis. I agree with you, George was quicker over the course of the weekend for sure in all the practices and in qualifying. Lewis's qualifying was pretty poor actually for him. But in that final stint, particularly the last, 10, 12 laps, Lewis was the quicker driver. I think Lewis came out, so George came out, was it 14 seconds behind Leclerc? Lewis came out a further 5 seconds, I think, behind George. And by the time George had caught up to Leclerc, Lewis was right behind George as well, and had made up that 5 second gap himself. So, yeah, I think George definitely had the stronger weekend overall, right up until that last lap. But yeah, that last sort of 10 laps or so, I think Lewis probably left a little bit more on his tyres and was probably a bit more able to chuck the car, let's say, than George was. But yeah, it's just, I agree with you totally. Just a mistake I don't really think he'll make again. I mean, he's made a few of these over the course of his time in Formula One, particularly with Williams. There are a couple there. One at, was it Imola in particular?
Yeah, he took out Bottas.
Yeah, and was that under the safety car as well? That was a pretty bad one for him. He doesn't make them too often, but he has got them in the locker, and I think you could tell he was absolutely distraught about it after the race. But some of the things he was sort of overheard saying to himself, I thought were really interesting. Like, you said, am I just an effing rookie or whatever? And like, you can tell confidence is a fragile thing. I really hope he has a conversation with Toto and probably Lewis as well. I would have thought about what's happened, and they'll G him up and get him psyched up and ready for Suzuka next weekend, because it's just one of those errors. It just these things sometimes happen. You're pushing. I think the main thing is just it's such a physical race as well. Like, you spend the best part of an hour and 35 minutes
in that
humidity and heat, chucking the car around, maintaining such a high level of concentration, trying not to cook your tires, but maintain a really good level of pace to catch the cars in front. And then you're trying to make all these overtakes, and making overtakes on drivers like Leclerc is really difficult as well, and Verstappen, by the way. I think, by the time you get to that last lap, I think these things happen sometimes. But I agree. I don't think it's a mistake he'll make again. No. What makes you think, or what made you think the stuff between George and Lewis was spicy then?
Well, similar to what you rate, actually. So I think Lewis, definitely those last couple of laps, he almost looked impatient that he was stuck behind George, and he didn't look like he was going to put a move on him, but you could see George was really struggling, and I think he looked a bit shaky going into a couple of corners. And I think I thought at one point, we're going to get them fighting with each other, and it never really happened. But I thought Lewis's body language at the end was quite interesting on the podium and in the warm-up room. He didn't seem overly happy to be on the podium. It didn't seem overly shocked or surprised. I think he was probably sat there thinking, if that's me in front of the two of us, I take them. I'm winning this race, or I would have won. If that was me, I would have won that race. And I think that's how he definitely came across to me. And he seemed very mellow and very great to see us on the podium. Unlucky for George, but really happy. So I think that was quite telling. And I think if they did get to a championship battle between the two of them, I think it would be pretty selfish. I think George would go into it thinking, I've got a chance just as much as he has. I don't think he sees himself as the number two. And I think, for Lewis, I think he'll be absolutely kicking himself that he didn't qualify better, because that just set him up for a really poor start. And then he had to be a bit ambitious in the start. And then there's, I did feel they got a bit hard done by. He obviously passes Lando and then passes George, then takes the escape route. The one on George was probably fair because he did get quite a bit of advantage, but he'd passed Lando by the time they'd got that. And I just thought that was just slightly Lando whinging on the radio and then getting what he wanted, and Lewis having to hand it back. But that kind of messed up the start of his race, really, because, like we said, he was having to faff around trying to hand back places and not get a penalty.
So that was one of those that when it happened, I thought, actually, Mercedes, they had a very good weekend, but I personally think their decision making there should have been, because Lewis did have to slow down quite a bit to let George by. I think they probably should have just said to George, we would ordinarily ask Lewis to give the place back, but we're confident he's only going to get a 5-second penalty. And as we saw with Perez, who we will talk about, I'm sure, only getting a 5-second penalty for slaloming into God knows how many drivers over the course of yesterday afternoon. It doesn't really make much difference if you're in a quick car and you can build a bit of a gap. Like, I think if they leave Lewis in position and say, we'll take the 5 seconds at the end of the race, he has an opportunity over the course of an entire Grand Prix to try and build a 5-second gap to whoever's behind him in whatever position he's in. And, if at that point, George is directly behind him and they can find a way to swap the cars or whatever, then great, by all means do it. But I think in that situation, had they had their time again, I think they'd probably just say, leave it as is, take the 5 seconds and see what Lewis can do from where he was on the grid, where he was on the track, because he was catching, and I feel like he could have put some pressure on some of the cars in front of him. So interesting. It's funny, isn't it, that the sort of four drivers, the three drivers that will be kicking themselves the most are Russell, Hamilton and Leclerc, because they all probably thought they had a good opportunity to win the race yesterday. Sainz obviously won it, and then the guy that finished second hasn't won a race yet, and probably it didn't really seem like he was kicking himself or anything. He seemed pretty happy to be second. And I did, the thought crossed my mind. I thought, is that what you want from Lando right now? Like, if I was him, I'm not saying I'd send the car up the inside on Sainz or whatever to try and nick the win, but he's not won a race yet, and this is probably the best opportunity he's going to have all year to win one. Who knows where we're going to be with stuff for next year and then regulation changes and whatever else. Like, you're not going to get that many chances. And I did think Lando was a little bit conservative, actually. He seemed a bit pleased to to be there and sort of, the whole like, thanking Carlos for DRS and stuff. Like that's, cute Carlando chat, whatever, fine. But I'm not really sure if you're and this is what I've said about Lando before, if you're a born and bred winner, is that right? I don't think we see that from any of the other four if they're in the same situation.
No, agreed.
Yeah, it's just an interesting kind of behavioural thing I picked up yesterday after.
Do you think it's more like acceptance? Like, I can't win this, so there's no point trying to fight. There's no point trying to fight for the win. I might as well just get as best as I can get, and second for me is the best outcome I can get. So just hold on to that and just be happy with that, rather than think, that's a really missed opportunity. Because I do agree. I do think he's on course to break a record, isn't he? To be the longest. No, I'm talking rubbish. I thought he was going to break a record for the longest streak without a win.
No, not yet.
But maybe because it might. Maybe the stat I'm thinking of is most number of podiums without a win.
Yeah.
So I think he's on course to meet that. But like, was it a couple of years ago when he was in Russia and he kind of cocked up with his tires in the wet and lost the opportunity? He could have won that race if he hadn't cocked that up.
Yeah.
Will he end up ruining it at the end of his career, thinking, this was a race I could have won?
Maybe. I mean, he's seriously rapid. Like, he was really good this weekend. And I did think, I was kind of rooting for him a bit because obviously he's not won one yet. We get a new winner, McLaren on the top step again after a long time. And like, it would have been quite nice. So I was rooting for him a bit yesterday, but I don't know. It all felt a little bit conservative to me. Like, I totally appreciate that Ferrari probably had pace in hand, but McLaren must know, and Norris must know, the Ferrari eats its tyres really quickly, and they were managing that race the way they were for a reason. Should the onus not have been on them to maybe look to attack a bit more and put a bit more pressure on them to try and sort of instigate some level of change, in the same way that Mercedes took the risk and saw, well, we can either sit here pootling behind on our hard tyres, never making an attempt to try and win the race, and we'll take double points finish fine, or do we pit both cars, put them on a tyre offset and see what happens? They took the bolder, go for the race win approach. I'm not saying McLaren had the same option with regards to pit stops, but maybe Lando did at some point over the course of that race have an opportunity to put Sainz under a bit more pressure than he did.
Yeah. I think as well, you say about the driver mentality, also a bit the team mentality as well. Like all those two teams, Ferrari and Mercedes, are there to win races. That's why they're in the sport. Whereas it felt like a little bit like McLaren, but like, well, we're just happy to just climb up the constructors, or we're just happy to be on the podium. We've had such an awful start. We're just happy to get as much points. Whereas, maybe they need to switch their mindset, their mentality, but like, if we go for wins, no matter what, we go for wins, and that maybe that's what they need to start winning more and to win championships. Because I think a lot of people think that the McLaren is probably at some point soon in the next couple of years is going to be a championship threat. Whereas if they don't have that mentality where it's like, we can't afford to be conservative, we go out to win, they're just going to be exposed by those teams that have that. And we've seen that with Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes. That's what completely drives those teams. Whereas don't think we see that much from McLaren. Maybe that's just them being realistic, but also like, this is a really good opportunity for them to show how good they were to go for a win.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's definitely. I mean, they're definitely in a specific place that means they're not realistically going to be challenging for races semi-regularly, like the other three probably are and consider themselves to be, with regards to challenging for championships and stuff. But opportunities don't come along that often. They've got two really outstanding drivers now. Norris has been in the sport a good little while. He's really, really good. He should be winning races. One or two a year, I would have thought, pretty soon, minimum. When opportunities like this come along, particularly in a season like we've had, where they're probably not going to get one again, I don't think, between now and the end of the year. Just be a bit braver, maybe. But yeah, I mean, you can't begrudge them. I mean, they finished second and seventh, very good. Great points all for McLaren again. Piastri had a really good race. Yeah,
where he started really far down, didn't
17th, yeah. So he got screwed. Yeah, he got screwed because of the crash at the end of Q1. He was on a quick lap and probably would have made it, which is a bit of a shame. He climbed all the way up from P17 to P7 on a track where it's really difficult to overtake. So no mean feat there. Very good. Good points for McLaren. But yeah, again, it feels like there was a little bit left out there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, good point. And we should come on to them we've not given them any mention really at all so far, except from passing. Red Bull,
Shocking.
nowhere at all. What happened? Why were they so far off it this weekend? Was it just they could never get the setup right and just a combination of errors in Q2?
Yes. So a bit from column A, a bit from column B. So on column A, the way the car's designed makes it very malleable on most circuits, and it's designed to run lower than every other car on the track, and that's why it's largely the fastest car pretty much everywhere we go, bar this weekend. Now, Singapore has some interesting characteristics that made them change that setup a little bit. So historically, it's been really bumpy, so they've had to soften the suspension. But what they didn't account for was that a lot of the track had been resurfaced, so it wasn't super bumpy, and they actually got loads and loads of downforce on those set chunks of the circuit. And what that meant was the back of the car hunkered right down, and it kept bottoming out. So if you saw any of the free practices where Red Bull were really struggling, the car was bouncing and smacking the floor and loads of sparks and
nice
stuff.
to see them have porpoising issues.
It wasn't quite porpoising, but it was bottoming out. They were just generating too much downforce, basically. So it was bottoming out. So again, they put some stiffer suspension on. That then just basically moved the problem a little bit for them. And they got to free practice 3, and they actually looked like they made a few positive steps and got the setup in a place where it was reasonably all right. They sort of still 0.3 off Ferrari, but not too bad. And the car was at least drivable. And I actually think if they leave the car as it is, Max probably qualifies in the top 6 and still gets pretty close, if not wins the race, realistically, because his race pace was actually very good, as we found yesterday. Yeah. Largely because it's Max Verstappen. But they didn't do that. They made more changes, and the setup was just shocking. And yeah, all the way through qualifying, both drivers really, really struggled. And then, the coup de grace was Liam Lawson knocking Max Verstappen out.
Great moment that.
In Q2, which was amazing. Yeah, I mean, great for Lawson. A shocker for Red Bull. Verstappen was really, really fuming. Checo was pretty annoyed.
But why is he fuming? He's literally got a mammoth lead. He does not need this race win.
No, of course he doesn't. But there's a difference between him and Lando right there, I think. That's it. At its core, right there, you've got one guy who, and this, it's the same with Lewis. It was the same with Schumacher. All these great drivers. Any situation in which they are not number one is not acceptable, right? It doesn't matter if it's practice, qualifying, race, whatever. Any situation in which they've been beaten by another human in a car it just doesn't compute. And yeah, he's just built like that. So yeah, he was really very angry. And yeah, Checo was really annoyed. I mean, there's been some chat about whether the new technical directives had an effect. I'm not really sold on that. So they've made a couple of smallish tweaks to things like flexible bodywork and the floor, neither of which really I don't think make a massive difference from Red Bull. I mean, we'll see next weekend if it continues. I mean, if they struggle next weekend, then we know something's definitely up, because Suzuka's a pure aero circuit and it's the best aero car by some margin. So we'll see next weekend if it's a continued issue, but. Yeah, they just made poor decisions all through the weekend, it looked to me. And I, for that reason, alongside another one, which we should talk about, I've given them my Latifi. Red Bull, first one.
Wow, fair play. Yeah. That's the first ever one they've had?
I think so. I think it's the first one this year. Yeah, it got to be.
Verstappen's had one.
No, Checo has, but I don't think we've given one to Red Bull, the team, yet.
Didn't you give one for it being so boring?
Oh, I don't know.
Yes, you did at the Belgian
I gave him one, not for being boring. I gave him one for being a menace on the radio, didn't I?
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah, that was it.
Okay, but the first one for the team overall, for sure.
Team overall. Yeah, they didn't have a good one, did they? And also they seem to get their strategy. They seem to have a really bad strategy weekend race as well, because Max was on the hard tire, and that seemed to be quite clever. And then I think they pitted, or I can't remember the order of it, but basically the virtual safety car came out like the complete wrong time for them, and that just caused them all sorts of issues. But then actually that final stint for Max, he was pretty. He showed pace out of nowhere. Whereas in the first half of the race, I remember being stuck behind Magnussen for quite a while and just not really advancing on ninth for a long period. Whereas he was cutting through the field towards the end of the race, and he was quite close actually to taking fourth from Charles. So he kind of woke up a little bit. Before we come on to the other reason why you want to give you the TV, we should just cover Checo. I mean, I think confidence is rock bottom for him right now, because the mistakes he was making were so poor. He crashes into Yuki Tsunoda at the start of the race and doesn't get anything, and they didn't weirdly show that replay during the race, which I thought was a bit odd, because it's Yuki's car was absolutely demolished by him. And then there was one with Albon where he proper shunts into Albon, and Albon sort of says, "Have you just seen that? Like he's been trying to do that for most of the race."
Yeah.
And then he just was there anything else he did, or was that it? No, I think it was just the two
I
things.
think there were just those two, yeah, in the race anyway. I mean, there were some things in qualifying which we'll probably cover as well. But yeah, I mean the Tsunoda one, sort of, I feel like that does happen sometimes on first lap. General first lap shenanigans as they seem to happen like that. But the Albon one was particularly egregious. Like he'll take a penalty for that 100% next weekend. I'm sure of it.
Oh no, he took a penalty in the race.
Yeah,
and it moved him from 8th to 8th.
Yeah, he's got to get a grid drop for that in my mind. Like, I just don't think it's nowhere near enough of an incentive as 5 seconds malarkey, load of rubbish.
Especially when they're surrounded by no one.
Yeah, but yeah, the Albon one. I feel like an Albon, like there's no guarantee he'd have got points, but given what happened ahead of them to Ocon and Russell, there was definitely a chance there for some points for Albon. So yeah, Williams, I'm sure, will feel quite aggrieved about the fact that Checo just drove into the side of their lead driver. Yeah, really poor. Yeah, Checo had a pretty poor weekend again.
He's going to be good on street circuits. He's terrible now.
Yeah, I mean, the car was shocking, to be fair. It had absolutely no grip whatsoever. And it's really bad when Max Verstappen's not even making it into Q3. I think you could generally probably turn that engine down to 50% and he'd still make it into Q3 most weeks. Yeah, it was bad. And yeah, just another very poor weekend for Checo in general, I think. What would have been interesting is if Checo had actually managed to outperform Max on a weekend where the car was really rubbish.
But that's a good point.
Didn't happen, did it?
Yeah.
So,
no, yeah. And so what's the other reason you want to give Red Bull?
Helmut Marko is the other reason.
So just for those that might not have heard this, do you want to give some context?
So he was asked a question by, I think it was by a journalist or something, maybe a week and a half ago, about why Sergio Perez is really struggling in comparison to Max Verstappen, and he basically suggested that the reason Checo didn't have the same level of kind of commitment that Max did was because he was Mexican, which is pretty vile generally. I mean, I mean, never mind that he said it. The fact that that's even a thought in his head is quite worrying of itself. I mean, it's just, anyway, it's just horrible. He had to come out and apologize, and Red Bull really fumbled the response, I think, as well. Like they basically said, "Oh, he doesn't work for us." So they had an apology from another organization or whatever outside of Red Bull Racing, even though he's on the bloody pit wall every single weekend for Red Bull Racing, kitted out in Red Bull merchandise and representing Red Bull in every interview he does. They really fumbled it and like didn't really do much. And I mean, Checo didn't really help either. He just said, "I'm sure he basically just washed it off and said it's fine," kind of thing. I don't think it is. And you saw the response from some of the other drivers, in particular Lewis, who was asked about it. Just generally very disappointing way of dealing with it. And as I say, the fact that somebody so senior in Formula One, who's responsible for so many drivers' careers and development, at least even thinks like that, or thinks like that at all, never mind says it in an interview that's being recorded, is a bit of a concern, really. I would have thought. I mean, if I was Red Bull, he'd be out the door, right? I think if he was in another organization, he'd be out the door by now. Never mind the stuff he said recently. He said loads of other stuff besides previously, but nothing quite as egregious as this. I'm kind of surprised he's still kept in post, really. And the FIA was super weak about it as well. Didn't reprimand him, really. Just pretty poor. Anyway, so for that reason, plus the fact their performance was bad and strategy was bad and their decision making during setup was really bad, and Checo drove really poorly and drove into people. Just all in all, a very, very bad weekend for Red Bull.
Yeah, agreed. And I think my other fee is to the FIA for partly for only giving them a warning for stuff like that. I thought it was just ridiculous. Like, where's the message you're sending? What you're saying is that you can only be warned for that when it was so awful. And I just found the Christian Horner response to it all just really bizarre. He kind of comes out and says, "Well." I've saw the Sky bit. He kind of muddles around for a little bit, and then he goes, "Yeah," and well, it's not really employee, and he has apologized, but it should be clear as anything what he needs to do in that scenario. He just needs to come out strong. So we completely don't disagree with his saying we've had a word with him privately. He doesn't represent the views of the team, It's really disappointing to see, but we'll work with him on that. And it's a real shame that he said that about Checo, because although Checo struggled, he's still a really talented driver, and we really back him. Like, that's all it needed. Whereas Checo's not going to call out, especially with where his probably contract is going. He's not going to call out his own boss, is he? Ultimately, at the end of the day. The other reason why I'm giving the FIA Latifi, which they're still holding. I think they've now got that lead back again, being the most Latifi owners, is they're just the inconsistencies in some of the punishments they were handing out. So in qualifying, Max impedes Yuki and does some other stuff as well, and gets no penalty. And I saw someone on Twitter done this. They'd gone back and found the wording of other decisions that the FIA had given out throughout the season, where it's almost word for word, but the only thing that's different is that Max doesn't get a penalty and everyone else does. Like, where is your consistency? Where you're not even following your own precedent. Like, just not a good look to make you world champion. Like, he has different rules applied to him. That just annoyed me. I thought it was really poor officiating, really. Yeah. I think you should, like I say, they should go back and look through their records. Oh, what did we give last time? Right, okay, fine. Is there anything mitigating it? No. Right, 5-place grid penalty. Bam, done. Like, it's not difficult.
So the Tsunoda one I thought was really interesting. So the pit lane exit one, where he sits in there and holds up George, and they play that little radio game to try and make it sound like Max has an issue, when we all know he's just holding up other drivers basically to try and cost them qualifying time. That does happen semi-regularly, and whatever. It didn't cost anybody anything in the end. The Yuki one I thought was really interesting, because Yuki Tsunoda drives for AlphaTauri. And AlphaTauri did not send a representative to the FIA to moan about the fact that their driver was impeded and it cost him qualifying positions, like any other team 100% would have done. Now, this right now, that just goes to the heart of why I think it's mental that teams are allowed to have basically second teams in the sport. It's just, it makes no sense. And all I could think about afterwards was, imagine if you pick up that situation and you transfer it into the 2021 season. And you transfer it into, let's say, Abu Dhabi or the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, and Max Verstappen impedes a driver from AlphaTauri. Lewis Hamilton impedes a driver from Ferrari, let's say, for argument's sake. Ferrari send every lawyer they've got down to the FIA to moan about the fact Hamilton's held up Leclerc, and AlphaTauri send nobody down to complain about Max Verstappen holding up their driver. And the end result is all these other drivers get penalties, 3-place grid drops and whatever, for impeding, and Max gets nothing. It's just totally balmy. I have no idea why this is allowed, but it is.
I saw that as well, and I thought, this is really bad for the sport if you've got teams colluding with each other because they're the same sort of family. And then I read an article, so I think Jonah's trying to sort of debunk this, or saying, because for the Stroll crash, they sent someone Aston Martin needed to appear, but because of, they sent him like a WhatsApp saying, "Can you come?" And he was like, "Well, no, I'm in the medical centre with Lance." And then because of that informal nature, they then said, "Well, we'll just informally invite AlphaTauri for their one." And then I think AlphaTauri missed it or something like that. But like, still, that it still wasn't particularly clear. Still a bit odd. Still changing the rules as they're doing it. And again, Formula One needs to be seen to be the governing, referee of the sport. Why make it out that two of the teams that are owned by the same people are colluding with each other? Like, just clear it up. Just force someone there. Like, I don't know.
I just don't believe that if Yuki was held up by any other driver in any other car on the grid, they don't send someone down to the FIA to have a massive moan and represent themselves. Yeah, there's just no way they don't.
Yeah, they just need to sort it out.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll take a very quick break. Hello and welcome back from the break. Hope you had a jolly old time. Now, Sam, we want to just pick up a few other bits and pieces from the race before we go on to predictions, which I'm sure are going to be interesting because one of us did have Max Verstappen and Max Verstappen did not come through with a win. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that's caused a bit of chaos with the results. So I look forward to finding those out. I suppose there's one person I'd like to cover, and with the feature William on Williams, is Logan Sargent. Not a good weekend for him. I think for two main reasons. Has quite a rookie crash, really, putting it in the wall. and luckily, well, not fully bending it, but losing the front in the wall, and then managed to limp round to the pits. And fair play to him, managed to keep going for a while to get that back. But that obviously was not a good move for him because that was the first proper incident of the race. And then I think Liam Lawson scoring points as the other rookie that hadn't scored points, having only been in the sport 3 races now.
Yeah.
I think really, really does not help his case to stay in the sport. And I think he's gone. I don't see enough of why they would keep him. I think he's been shown flashes, but he's been far too inconsistent, makes far too mistakes. And Liam Lawson is just a free advertisement and of what they could get if AlphaTauri decide to go for Danny Rick and Yuki, which I think is now what's expected to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If I was Williams, I'd try and get Liam Lawson in because I think he'd be a great fit alongside Albon, and I think he would really develop. And he's shown a lot in just 3 races. What do you make of the Sargent's weekend?
Terrible. Yeah, another really poor weekend for Sargent. I mean, it's not a great circuit for Williams, so they were never really like on the pace. I mean, Albon lucked out and maybe had a chance of points because of what was happening ahead of him. But yeah, the car wasn't fantastic. But yeah, Logan, he's proving to be quite expensive now, isn't he? I think in terms of damages and stuff for Williams.
Most damage, isn't he, of course, to any driver for any
yeah,
season.
Somewhere above 3 million now, isn't it, or something? He's probably cost the team, they reckon, this season. As a team without that much money, as we know. And particularly when you look at what Lawson's been doing in the AlphaTauri, I think it's a no-brainer really for Williams to try and have a chat with Red Bull and see if they can get a loan for a year or two.
And it's a no-brainer for Red Bull as well. Why not go and give one of your rookies a full season in a good team and with a good team principal, better than sitting in the reserves?
Absolutely, yeah. And they'll know, realistically, Checo's not going to continue probably beyond 2024. So the end of next season, there'll be a vacancy somewhere in the Red Bull kind of organisation, and he'll be primed and ready to go. And another season under his belt for Williams would be excellent. So yeah, he's been really good, Liam Lawson. I mean, he just looks really comfortable behind the wheel, quite brave as well. Actually, at times, like he didn't let Max didn't wave him by yesterday. He put up a bit of a fight, drove very well, drove quite nice and cleanly as well, made a bit of a fight of it, which was good. Obviously qualified really well, knocked out Verstappen. He was the highest qualifying Red Bull driver this weekend, which is just a fantastic accolade to have in the pocket in a season where Red Bull have totally dominated the sport. Really good. I mean, he's got to get a drive next year. It's in a way, it's a little bit disappointing that all these teams have like shored up their driver partnerships ready for next season already, because I've watched him a few, he's only had 3 races, but they've been 3 quite different, and yesterday in particular, a really difficult circuit. He's not really driven much of before in tough conditions in a car he's, only done 2 races in so far. And to perform like that, I mean, there must be a couple of teams a little bit further up probably than AlphaTauri thinking, maybe we've made a bit of a mistake signing up our drivers already for 2024. But either way, I really hope he's bound to get a seat, surely. I mean, there's no way Williams is going to continue with Logan Sargent, and you never know, crazy things happen in Formula One. It's possible he gets a drive somewhere, if not at Williams. So yeah, really good. He looks really impressive, doesn't he? And another really not dissimilar to Piastri in kind of how chill, chill and so quick and chill,
confident and chill.
Really good.
Yeah, he's shown form similar to Piastri did. Maybe not to level, but just that confidence to come in and just be under the radar. There's 2 great Liam Lawson stats that I've got for you. He was the first driver this season to overtake Verstappen when he unlapped himself at Zandvoort.
Oh yeah.
Which I thought was absolutely brilliant. And it's more Liam Lawson, but AlphaTauri now have more points than they've had drivers this season.
Well, good for them. Well, this is it. Yeah, Lawson has 2. Yuki's only got 3, and he's been driving all season. So
yeah.
Brilliant.
And he's driving, and he's confirmed driving again for next weekend as well.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting, actually. I mean, AlphaTauri have developed the car, looks like, in a really good direction the last couple of races. So I think they'll perform all right, actually, next weekend. We'll see.
Yeah.
But, very good.
And then Ocon, which should quickly cover, was actually having such a good race, was cutting through the field, and then it all went wrong. And he seemed furious and really, really unhappy with the unreliability. I felt quite sorry for him. Just he didn't get out of that car for a good while. But yeah, he a really strong performance. I was texting a friend at the time. They said, when he was cutting through the field. Like that's Ocon at his peak, and he's shown that when he's good at attacking, he's really good at just working his way through the field. But it's just a shame he's got those inconsistencies. And if you've not listened, I would recommend going back to our underrated driver episode, because you covered Ocon, I covered Gasly as our two picks. And I think Ocon has definitely showed flashes of that this season. But yeah, any thoughts on Ocon going off?
Very good. I was gutted for him, particularly as he was racing on his birthday as well.
No, I didn't
Nightmare.
know that.
Terrible birthday.
What a horrible Cindy birthday in a sweaty car.
I know, in a sweaty car. Particularly, I mean, as well, he had to get really feisted in with Alonso and Checo. Did a really nice move, actually, on both of them. I actually think he made a bit of a mug of Alonso, which was quite funny, given the history those two have. And then, for the car to break down again, because Renault, because Alpine, whatever. I'll give up. Not only is the engine significantly less powerful, it's really unreliable. And it's costing them big time now. And it's just a real shame for Ocon, because he was performing really well, and now Gasly's 9 points ahead of him in the championship, and that will really annoy him because he shouldn't be. Real shame for him. But he drove really well all weekend. He's generally a bit of a specialist on street circuits as well. Like if you think about how well he performed in Monaco, he did really well in Singapore as well. So, bit of a shame, that one. Hopefully they can get a reliable car together for him. And Alpine are a bit less mental next year.
A bit less mental. To go to an Alpine former employee, Mr. Fernando Alonso. What a weekend he had. He broke the record for being the first driver to drive over 100,000 kilometers in a Formula 1 car in a race. And boy, did his performance live up to that. And he made so many mistakes, which was a real comedy. I greatly enjoyed him. He was the only driver driving for Aston Martin after Stroll had his big crash and decided he was a bit too sore to race. Alonso picked up a 5-second penalty for making quite a rookie error of going over the pit lane lines and then coming back in. He also had a terrible pit stop, which was really slow. He span and he finished last. And he was said on the radio, this car is undrivable. So he's gone from at the start of the season saying, what a lovely car to drive, to being undrivable. And I don't know if you saw this. On Friday, there were reported sightings of lots of lizards on the track. I'm genuinely not joking. This is genuinely what happened. And there were two. One was called just Lizard, and then someone else called it Lizard Godzilla, which I thought was quite good. And then apparently Mr. Alonso accidentally ran over one of them.
Accidentally.
Yeah, and well,
I'm joking. I'm not suggesting Alonso kills lizards for fun.
If I said to you at the start of this podcast, you'd end up saying the words "Alonso doesn't kill lizards for fun." Oh, that's a top tier comment. That is. I was going to say the lizard got his revenge, but nothing will live up to that comment you just come up with there. The lizard. Alonso doesn't kill lizards. Oh, what a statement.
It's been a bad year for the wildlife. When you consider the bird that got killed by Max Verstappen and carried around with him all race as well, that was not good. Not good.
Any thoughts on Alonso?
Just rubbish, really. I mean, it gets a bit of sympathy because it looks like. I mean, this hasn't been confirmed, and I've actually not looked at any comments from Aston Martin about it. But it looked like he hit a bit of carbon fiber. Not lizard, apparently. He apparently hit a chunk of Sargent's car, and that made the car, that really messed with the car's stability and stuff, and got stuck somewhere potentially. So that's a factor. But yeah, some of the errors he made were pretty poor. But like, I don't think it can't really have affected raceability of the car, because if you look at that little sequence with Checo and Ocon, I think that happened after. So it didn't look to me like the Aston Martin was super struggling or anything like it. He just got done basically by Ocon. Yes, the lizard stuff was pretty crazy, but quite enjoyable. I mean, I don't want to see animals getting killed in Formula 1. I have to say, it would be nice if they could find a way to stop that happening.
Kill lizards.
Well, not that we know of. We can neither confirm nor deny. But yes, it did make for comedy watching, didn't it? It was practice, wasn't it? Mainly in Friday practice, they kept appearing. So yeah, I think they'll learn that for next time. Find a way to keep the lizards off track. Maybe just like gather them all up and just stick them all in the Aston Martin garage. Put them all in Alonso's cockpit.
So many you can kill.
Yeah.
We should just say on Aston though, they are sinking in the constructors' standings. McLaren are gaining them quite quickly now, and what started off as being in that top table of the teams this season, they've looked unrecognisable for quite a long time now. The car development has obviously not worked, and they really risk not finishing third or fourth in the constructors, which would be pretty bad for them, I think, really, considering where the season started. And also, that's a combination of the car performance, but also having a complete idiot in the car number 2 that is just nowhere near the level of the other drivers on the grid. I'm sorry, but he's a nepo baby. He has to be called out for being a nepo baby.
He is. It just tickled me. I wasn't expecting you to go as hard as you did then.
It's got to be said. It's got to be said.
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Just watch us getting a bloody lawsuit from Lawrence Stroll. Yes, no, it's a poor weekend for Aston Martin. They've clearly been outdeveloped anyway over the course of the season by Mercedes, by Ferrari, by McLaren, and probably by Alpine, and almost by Williams as well at points, which doesn't say a lot, does it, for them, really? I mean, it may well be that they're focusing a lot of their efforts on next year's car and trying to make it as competitive as possible for the top of the grid, but either way, they've dropped off quite a bit. They bought a new floor in, didn't they, 2 races ago, and that looked like it might make a bit of a difference, but yeah, they had a bit of a horror weekend. Obviously, all started with Lizardgate, and then Lance Stroll binning the car in quite spectacular fashion. It was quite a big crash, wasn't it, actually?
Huge.
It was also really annoying. I was fuming, actually, about that. I've forgotten how annoyed I was. Now I've just got annoyed again thinking about it because it was a really exciting
game.
No, well, a bit.
Oh.
More that, as you know, I like Oscar Piastri a lot, and he was in the drop zone and on a quick lap, and then he had to stop it because Alonso smashed his car up and covered the entire circuit in carbon fibre, so they had to red flag the session. Yeah, that was very annoying. Crashed at a very inopportune moment, as he so often does. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about that. I agree with you. They should have another driver in the car. They should probably why not give Liam Lawson a go?
Yeah.
I mean,
he'd give Fernando a run for his money, I think.
Definitely. I don't think you could go far wrong. You get an exciting young driver in the car, go down the same route as McLaren. And yeah, they've got some serious development work to do. And as well, I mean, the danger as well, of course, for everybody is that Haas are bringing a B-spec car to Austin soon, which will be exciting. I'm not expecting it to be super rapid, but it might be a bit further up the grid than they are at the moment. And that's exactly where Aston are. So
when you say a B-spec car, is it just going to be the exact same car but with stars and stripes livery on it, just to look a bit different?
That would be really funny, wouldn't it? Or it's like they turn up and it's a NASCAR.
Yeah, I enjoy that. It's something completely different.
Yes. Yeah, we shall see. But yeah, no, they've got some work to do. Definitely, Aston Martin, if they want to maintain their current position. If I was them, I'd be more worried about McLaren than I would Mercedes and Ferrari. Frankly,
yeah,
they've got no chance catching them now.
And on maintaining positions, have I maintained my lead in the predictions game?
You have. Yes, let's do it. I'm not looking forward to this very much. Okay, so scores on the doors for the Singapore Grand Prix 2023.
Here we go.
You had New Bay Oscar Piastri. You predicted him to finish in 8th, and he finished in 7th. Ooh. Very well done. You pick up 1 point. You then had the other McLaren, Lando Norris. You predicted to finish in 6th, and he finished in 2nd. So you picked up 4 points for him.
Not too bad.
And then you had Lance Stroll, Daddy's favourite boy. Now, you and I have reached an agreement that because Lance Stroll binned the car and he didn't miss the race through appendicitis or illness. I don't know, a coconut landing on his head or something, or illness, whatever.
A lizard attack.
Yes. We've agreed that his final classification will be dead last, and therefore you will pick up 7 points because you predicted him finishing the 13th. Now, that precedent's been set. What we've agreed, listener, is that if a driver misses a Grand Prix through their own actions, their own stupidity, I would also argue that Stroll crashing his bike and breaking his wrist before the season started was probably one of those. Their kind of final classification stands. So even if they can't take part, they will be classified last. But if they miss the race because of illness or something out of their control, what we would do is we would randomly remove a driver from the other person's predictions. So it would basically just be a 2v2 that particular weekend. Which is interesting, isn't it? Because we had Ricciardo recently, and he missed the race through his own stupidity because he crashed the car, but was replaced by Liam Lawson. So we included him. So maybe we do it in a situation where there isn't time for a replacement because Stroll called it so late. There was no way.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brought you to a total of 12 points for this week.
Okay, pretty happy with that.
I had Esteban Ocon, who I predicted to finish in 12th, and his engine gave out, and he was classified as 18th, so I pick up 6 points for him.
Okay, this could have been worse.
I had Fernando Alonso, who never fails to let me down any opportunity he has. I predicted him optimistically to finish in 6th place. He ended up classified 15th, so I picked up 9 points for him. And then I had Max Verstappen, who's going to win every race from now to the end of the end of the season. But of course, in Singapore, Red Bull had a shocker, so he finished in 5th instead of 1st, and cost me 4 points for a total of 19 points.
Unlucky. Well, what a weekend for it to all go wrong, hey?
Yeah. Oh, disastrous. Yeah, disastrous.
Throughout this season, Oscar Piastri has become like one of your new faves, and Fernando Alonso is just getting further and further down in your list of drivers that you like hate.
He's gone from being off my Christmas list to being actively on my shit list. So
you'll be sending him lizards now, won't you? You'll be sending him lizards to taunt him.
Yes, too right. Yeah, I'll send him a lizard a day. I'll send him one lizard per point that he's cost me this season. God, terrible. Yeah, I had to look back. He's cost me a lot this year. Very annoying.
I think he's the driver that's cost. He's one driver that's cost one person the most, right, throughout the season.
I think he must be.
Yeah,
he must be. I think there have been a couple of others. So like Lando's cost us a few. He cost me 9 earlier in the season because he had a really poor race and looked like was going to perform better. I think that might have been the first race or second race of the season, maybe when McLaren bought. I can't remember. Anyway, so there've been a few poor ones, but I think Alonso has consistently been the most irksome this season.
Yeah.
So I haven't actually done the numbers, so you're going to get to see these done live now.
Ooh, there we go. This is the mystery,
and it's live. So I have a number random generator here. Here you go, random number generator, as you can see on the screen.
There we go. I can see.
So first up, you've got number 5, Carlos Sainz.
I reckon he's going to finish 5th.
5th in Japan. Okay. I think you've sold Sainz a little bit short there, actually. Okay. Then you've got number 15. That's Valtteri Bottas.
Oh, God. He's going to finish 14th. The forgotten man will finish 14th.
Oh, a stat that we didn't mention. Only 2 drivers have finished in the points every race so far this season. Can you name the 2?
Lewis Hamilton.
Yep.
And Max Verstappen.
Very good. I don't know why Valtteri Bottas made me think of that, but... and then the last one...
scorer.
Oh, you've got both Ferraris. Number 6, Charles Leclerc.
Charles Leclerc. I reckon he's going to finish 6th.
Okay. So you're not too up on the Ferraris then?
No, it's hard to predict the Ferrari.
All right, my first number. Oh, goodness. 18. Magnussen. Oh, no. Haas. Terrible. Magnussen. Not in great form. I'll go 17th. Oh, my goodness. Number 20. Logan Sargent. I feel a bit bad. I feel a bit bad for the guy. I'm gonna have to go last, I think.
Ooh, that's not a bad chat, you know.
I'm gonna have to go last.
Is that our first ever last prediction?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think we're generally quite optimistic on this podcast.
Yeah, we are. That reflects the 2 optimistic people that we are.
18, 20. I'm assuming I'm going to get 19 now. Who would be Liam Lawson? That would be interesting, actually. Right, here we go. Number 9. Oh, no way. You're joking.
It's Alonso. No, it's
Daddy's
Alonso.
favourite boy, Lance Stroll.
Oh.
I don't believe it.
Oh, wow. I mean, there is a risk he might not make it, so he might get his replacement, which probably will be Drugovich.
Oh, that would be interesting. I genuinely think if that happens, I should go higher because Drugovich will probably be all right.
He's going to win.
Imagine if Drugovich came in and won the race. That would be unreal. Stroll.
Daddy's favourite boy.
He can't keep finishing outside the points. can't keep being this terrible.
But then he's sore. He's sore. He might still be sore next week.
Actually, do you know what? Japan is quite a difficult circuit. I don't think it's going to be great for him. I'm going to go 13th for Stroll.
I think that's a realistic one.
Wow. Okay. That's a tricky one. Wow. So, yeah, we didn't get any of the top 4. No Red Bulls, no McLarens, and no Mercedes.
Nice. Wow. And I've got both Ferraris.
You got both Ferraris.
You've got a tough hand, though. I'll give you that. You've got a tough hand.
It doesn't matter. I got a pretty good hand this weekend, and Max found a way to not win the race, and
that could be
Alonso found a way
weekend.
to yes,
you could go on a perfect weekend.
I mean, if I get a perfect weekend with Magnussen, Sargent, and Stroll, I will consider the game completed.
And do you think Max will be back to winning ways next weekend?
100%.
Okay.
By 30 seconds.
By 30 seconds, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
He's punished by a minute. He's going to go up. He's just going to go to another level.
Yeah, he'll be annoyed, definitely. And from what I hear, the simulation showed that the Singapore race was going to be really tough for Red Bull anyway. Never mind all the setup stuff, but that the car was an absolute beast in Japan.
Oh God! Wow.
So
it was fun having one normal F1 weekend of a season of so many repeated bonds of just Red Bull winning every weekend.
Yeah.
Will another team or someone else win? That's not Red Bull again this season.
Yeah, of course. Hamilton's going to win Brazil. I told you.
Nice. I love that belief.
100%. I'm sold. I'm telling you, if I get Hamilton that weekend, I'll predict him to finish first. I just believe.
There's a promise. That's what he'll want you to do. Believe.
If it happens, we'll be tweeting and Instagramming the absolute shit out of him to try and generate some excitement / a response. But yes, very good. All right, I think that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thanks very much for joining us. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you enjoyed it, why don't you share it with a friend? Hopefully they enjoy the pod more than I've enjoyed Fernando Alonso screwing me all season long. Follow us on Twitter.
Justice for the lizard.
Yeah. Hashtag doesn't kill lizards for fun. Follow us on Twitter at Lights Out Lads, and on Instagram we are at the Lights Out Pod. Will, we're off to Japan. It's my favourite race. Famously so.
Your favourite circuit.
I'm very excited. Well, I'm excited for the spectacle, I suppose. Less excited for the result, probably. But
also, I'm looking forward to the early start, 6:00 on a Sunday morning to watch Max Verstappen win by 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, unless some kind of madness happens.
Yeah, the weather's always quite unpredictable in Suzuka.
Yeah, let's have a little look. I'm going to look at the weather forecast right now. Fill some airtime.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a good one. I do like Suzuka. And then we've got a week's break, and in that week's break, we're going to cover part 2 of Greatest Controversy. So we're going to cover the one I didn't get to speak about last week because we were so into Abu Dhabi. So you can look forward to that in between the gaps. And I'm just checking my calendar. We then have Qatar at the end of that week. So, yeah, I actually really enjoyed the Qatar circuit on the F1 game. I mean, it's a sprint weekend as well. So, yeah, and now we head to Sam for the weather forecast for Suzuka.
It's going to rain all week, and it looks like it's going to be sunny on Saturday and Sunday. And actually quite hot. It's going to be up to 30 degrees on Saturday, 28 on Sunday. So
could still change, though. Could still change.
Yeah, you never know. Hopefully the rain... It's funny. It looks like it's raining quite hard either side of race weekend, unusually, for this season. It rains every race weekend, isn't it? But yeah, it should be good.
Warming.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, that's all from us. All the best. And goodbye.
Pray for the lizards.